The rich man brought a homeless girl and her baby into his home, where his paralyzed wife lived. But when he came back 4 days later, he couldn't believe what he saw. Before we continue, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. Yeah, Louis, I got it, I'm coming. Don't worry, Gordon's voice was tight with tension. Just give me a minute, I need to figure out who's going to stay with Megan. He sat behind the wheel of his black Mercedes, gripping it like a lifeline. The phone blinked on speaker mode, perched in its holder. Outside, the rain was hammering the windshield like a waterfall. Wait, Louis, hold on, Gordon suddenly blurted out, his voice cracking. His eyes, narrowed from stress, caught a flicker of movement in the headlights. Something dark and shapeless stood in the middle of the road. A dog, he muttered through clenched teeth. His heart skipped. Who in their right mind walks onto the highway in a storm like this, he murmured, easing off the gas. The car jolted as he slammed the brakes. The tires skidded across the slick asphalt. Crazy mutt, Gordon grumbled, shaking his head. Any normal animal would have been hiding in the bushes, trembling from the cold. But this one? It sat right there on the road, like it was daring him to come closer. Dusk had already wrapped the street in shadows, turning everything into a scene from a horror movie. Rain. Wind. Darkness. It felt like the world had split open. Gordon flung the door open, not caring about his expensive suit that was instantly soaked through, and stepped into a puddle. The cold rain lashed his face, but he barely noticed. Something inside him, instinct, duty, pushed him forward. Hey! Get out of here, he shouted, his voice swallowed by the storm. He waited for barking, the sound of paws scrambling away. Instead, a thin, piercing cry broke through the rain. A baby's cry. Gordon froze. The figure near the hood didn't move, it stood there like a ghost. He stepped closer, squinting through the downpour. His blood ran cold. It wasn't a dog. Standing before him was a girl. Fragile, like a shadow, soaked to the bone. Her hair was plastered to her pale face, and her wide eyes, full of terror and desperation, glowed in the beam of the headlights. In her trembling arms, she clutched a bundle, a baby. This scene, rain, child, girl, felt ripped from one of his worst nightmares. Are you insane? His voice, hoarse with emotion, rose above the storm. What the hell are you doing walking down the road in this kind of weather? What if I hadn't stopped in time? Every word was laced with anger, but beneath it, fear. What if he hadn't seen her in time? What if his car had ended another life? He clenched his fists, trying to stop shaking. The girl, barely 20, as fragile as a reed, flinched at his shout. Her shoulders hunched, and pain flickered in her huge, frightened eyes. She let out a sob, but when she spoke, her voice, though trembling, was surprisingly firm. Please, take her. Or give her to someone kind. I don't want her to live the kind of life I did. Those words, spoken with such quiet resolve, hit Gordon like a punch. Despite how worn down she looked, there was strength in her eyes. She wasn't begging for herself, only for the baby. Gordon grimaced. One sharp thought sliced through his head like a knife. Then why did you even have a kid if you couldn't give her a real life? Cruel words hovered on the tip of his tongue, but Gordon clenched his jaw and swallowed them. Who was he to judge? What did he know about her life? Maybe someone forced her into this. Maybe she'd been broken, abandoned in this pit of hopelessness. Maybe she never had a choice. If he'd had kids of his own, he would have moved heaven and earth to keep them from pain. A heavy breath escaped his chest, as if trying to push the lump from his throat. It's not my place to judge her, he thought. And somehow, that brought an odd sense of relief. Get in the car, he said. His voice was still rough, but the anger was gone. He noticed how she froze for a second, then pulled the baby closer and gently pressed her lips to its forehead. With the baby, he barked. She obeyed. Slowly, like she was afraid to break the moment, she opened the door and climbed inside. Mud and rainwater from her torn clothes soaked into the seat, but she didn't notice, her entire world was wrapped in that child. The baby, sensing warmth at last, quieted almost instantly, curling up in her trembling arms. The silence inside the car was thick. Gordon glanced at her exhausted figure and felt something shift inside him. His rage gave way to something else, a mix of pity, guilt, and a strange, painful urge to protect them both from this merciless world. "How old are you?" Gordon asked, his voice calmer now. 21, she whispered, shrinking into herself with embarrassment. Gordon grunted. She was young enough to be his daughter and already life had worn her down. 21, but the pain in her eyes spoke of decades. Then again, who was spared anymore? He and Megan had never had kids. And now, they never would. All because of that terrible accident, his fault, 15 years ago. Rainy highway, a wrong turn of the wheel. He walked away without a scratch. Megan hadn't taken a single step since. Her life was tied to a wheelchair from that day forward. Every morning, he still asked her to forgive him. And every time, she just said, "Gordon, I'm not angry." But he was. At himself. For stealing everything from her, her health, her youth, her chance to be a mother. Even something as simple as walking barefoot through grass, feeling the earth beneath her feet. They'd seen doctor after doctor, but all of them said the same thing, she would never walk again. A few years back, Megan had even begged him to leave her, find another woman, start a new family. But he just shook his head. Don't talk nonsense. He wasn't with her out of pity. He stayed because he loved her. Every day without her would have been hollow. And the fact that he'd taken away her chance at a full life still cut deeper than anything else. But over the years, they'd learned to live with the wheelchair. Learned to find joy, even with so much out of reach. Gordon pulled himself out of the tide of memories. He took a deep breath, trying to clear his mind, and turned the key in the gate. The Mercedes slowly rolled into their driveway. There were no steps or thresholds here, just level floors and wide doorways, designed so Megan could move around freely in her chair. This house was his quiet promise to her, to make her life just a little easier, a little more fair, after all the pain he'd caused. Megan was already waiting in the garage, the doors wide open. Her face, lit by the dim glow of the porch light, was tight with worry. Her eyes, the ones he knew better than his own, were searching for his. Rain still pounded the roof, its heavy rhythm only deepening her anxiety. "Sweetheart, I was going out of my mind," Megan's voice trembled. "This storm, it's awful." Gordon stepped out of the car, water dripping from his hair, sliding cold down his neck. But he didn't care. Through the fogged-up, rain-streaked windows, Megan couldn't see he wasn't alone. His chest tightened. How was he supposed to explain what he'd brought home? How could he even begin to describe what had happened out there on the road? "Megan," he started, his voice unsteady, "I don't even know where to begin. Something happened out there." He hesitated, moving toward her, and saw her face go pale. Her fingers tightened around the wheels of her chair. Then the car door creaked open, and the girl stepped out, slowly, like any sudden move might shatter whatever fragile thread was holding her together. She was trembling from the cold and fear. In her arms, wrapped in a damp, thin cloth, was her daughter, tiny, asleep, completely unaware of the chaos around her. The girl's face was a mixture of fear and surrender. She looked like she could vanish into the rain at any moment, leaving only the child behind. Gordon cleared his throat, trying to cover the awkwardness. She practically threw herself under the car. I panicked. "I brought her with me," he said, guilt creeping into his voice. Megan was still for a moment. Then something lit up in her eyes, a spark Gordon hadn't seen in years. "Oh, for heaven's sake, why are you just standing there?" she snapped. Her voice, usually soft, now rang out like a snapped wire. "Get inside. Both of you." She turned her chair sharply but paused, as if something struck her. She looked back at the girl, her expression suddenly gentler, almost motherly. "Wait, sweetheart. Are you breastfeeding, or does the baby need formula?" The girl flinched at the question. I'm breastfeeding," she whispered, so quietly her voice barely rose above the rain. But that single word carried fragile hope, and a silent plea so raw that Gordon felt something tighten in his chest. What moved her so deeply, Megan's kindness, or just the warmth of it, something she may not have felt in years? There wasn't time to wonder. Megan was already taking charge, her tone filled with a strength Gordon hadn't heard since before the accident, before the years of pain and guilt. "Gordon, go to the pharmacy and the store," she said, leaving no room for argument. "Get diapers, blankets, everything a baby might need. We'll go inside. They need to get warm. And fed." She looked at the girl with such warmth that, for the first time in a long time, the young woman seemed to feel like she belonged somewhere. Gordon nodded. He cast one last glance at Megan, who was already rolling toward the house, guiding the shivering girl behind her. There was a quiet determination in her movements, a confidence he hadn't seen in years. And something about that image, his wife, leading a lost soul through the storm, hit him deeper than he could explain. He got back into the car, but before starting the engine, he looked through the rain-covered window at them one more time, and something in his heart, frozen by guilt for so long, shifted. As he drove to the store, his thoughts raced. Tonight, they'd be warm and fed. But then what? Keeping them here wasn't a real solution. Maybe he could track down some relatives. Maybe her mother was still out there. Someone. Then he mentally slapped himself for leaving Megan alone. The girl seemed fragile, sure, but who knew what was going on in her head? And Megan, in a wheelchair, couldn't run or defend herself. Gordon pressed harder on the gas. He needed to get back fast. When he pulled into the driveway and stepped inside, the house was quiet, peaceful. Everything was in its place, but the air felt different. Warmer somehow. The baby was curled up peacefully in Megan's arms, and she was gently rocking her, completely enchanted. The girl, wrapped in a warm blanket, sat nearby with a cup of tea in her hands. Still tense, still cautious, but more at ease. Gordon was about to say something about the scene, something about how oddly comforting it was, but didn't get the chance. His phone rang. "Yeah, Louis, I get it. So what am I supposed to do now?" "All right, I'll figure something out," he muttered irritably but kept his voice down so as not to wake the baby. "Megan, let's talk in the other room." Without a word, she gently handed the baby back to her mother and rolled her chair out of the room. "Megan, I've got to leave for a few days, business. What do we do? Where do we send them? Maybe a shelter?" She looked at him like he'd lost his mind. "Are you serious? A shelter? Brittany and the baby are staying here. She's just a scared girl with nowhere else to go. She's staying. You go do what you need to do, don't worry, we'll be fine." Gordon stared at her in disbelief. How could she be so sure? How could he leave his wife alone with a complete stranger and a newborn? The girl was from the street, who knew what she might do? He tried to argue, tried every angle he could think of, but every reason he gave hit a wall of unshakable certainty. Megan had made up her mind. He had no choice but to give in. He left with a heavy heart. He kept meaning to sit down with Brittany, to ask her more, find out who she really was, but the right moment never came. In the next 3 days, he called Megan at least 20 times. At first, she answered calmly. Then, when the calls started coming every half hour, she began to lose her patience. "Gordon, stop. We're fine. Quit calling me every 30 minutes, she snapped before hanging up. And on the day he came back, she didn't answer at all. His mind spiraled instantly, throwing up 100 worst-case scenarios. He tried to stay calm, but his right foot had a mind of its own, pushing the gas pedal harder. He was sweating, shaking. What if he'd been too trusting? What if this all ended in disaster? He had let a stranger into their home. What if she wasn't alone? He didn't even know her real story, where she was from, who the baby's father was, how long she'd been on the streets. Chills ran through him just thinking about it. Every mile back felt endless. His heart pounded so hard, it felt like it might burst through his chest. He wasn't ready for whatever might be waiting at home. He didn't even pull into the driveway, just abandoned the car by the gate and rushed inside. At first glance, everything seemed calm. Nothing out of place. But when he peeked into the kitchen and saw Megan showing Brittany how to shape a pie, he froze. Of all the things he'd imagined, chaos, fear, disaster, this peaceful, almost cozy scene had never crossed his mind. The baby was babbling happily in a stroller by the table. Gordon had no idea where the stroller had even come from. Brittany was watching Megan intently, mimicking her every move with wide-eyed admiration. Gordon stood in the doorway, unable to believe what he was seeing. His heart, so used to carrying the weight of guilt and pain, now clenched from something entirely different, something warm, almost forgotten. Something that felt like home. Brittany, just days ago a trembling shadow in the rain, now sat at the kitchen table, her fingers clumsy but determined as she copied Megan's movements, trying to shape the pie. Little Holly, snug in a stroller Gordon hadn't even noticed at first, cooed happily, as if she instinctively knew she was safe now. And Megan, his Megan, whose face for so long had been clouded by the shadow of the past, was glowing. Her smile, real and bright, was the kind he hadn't seen since the accident took her legs, and with them, their shared dreams of a full, unburdened life. "Megan, where's your phone?" Gordon finally managed to ask, his voice catching slightly, betraying the swirl of emotion inside him. He was still trying to process how this soft, almost domestic scene could have grown out of the chaos of that stormy night. "Oh, you're back already?" Megan turned to him, her eyes sparkling as they met his. "I must have left it in the bedroom. Brittany and I have been busy all morning, waiting for you." She laughed, quietly, but with a joy so genuine it thawed something deep in him. That smile, so rare these last few years, was like sunlight breaking through heavy clouds. He realized then that he hadn't seen her this happy in what felt like forever. Gordon didn't say anything. His gaze shifted to Brittany. She had changed. Her face, once pale and worn, had softened. There was hope in her eyes now, real, childlike hope. But when she noticed his stare, her body tensed. Her shoulders stiffened, her hands froze mid-movement. She was still scared. Still waiting for him to change his mind, to take all this away, to strip her of the fragile warmth she had only just found. Gordon wanted to speak, to reassure her, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he just gave her a small nod, as if to say, "You're safe." That evening, after Holly had fallen asleep in a crib, Gordon and Megan sat at the table in the living room. The house, once filled with heavy silence, now felt wrapped in something warmer, gentler. But the conversation that followed wasn't easy. Gordon, still torn, voiced his worries. He talked about risk, about how Brittany was still a stranger, how her past was a blank page, and that it could all be dangerous. "Megan, we don't know who she is," he repeated, trying to sound firm. "What if she's hiding something? What if she's not who she says she is?" But Megan, just like she'd done years ago, stood stronger than his fears. "Gordon, look at her," she said softly but with quiet conviction. "That girl didn't end up on that road by accident. She's not just some runaway. She's a mother, one who was willing to give up everything for her child. Doesn't that deserve a chance?" Her eyes, glowing in the dim light of the lamp, were so full of belief that Gordon felt his resistance melt. He looked at his wife and saw not only the woman he'd loved all his life, but also the strength that had always made her his light, even in their darkest days. Megan had fallen in love with teaching Brittany and Holly everything she knew. She showed Brittany how to cook, patiently, step by step, how to knead dough, how to hold a knife properly, how to season soup just right. She told Holly stories, sang her lullabies her own mother used to sing. Her voice, gentle and warm, didn't just soothe the baby, it calmed Brittany too, who listened in quiet awe, as if hearing a lullaby for the very first time. For Megan, these moments became her salvation. In them, she found the meaning she had been missing since the accident. She couldn't walk, couldn't chase after a child or dance with one in her arms, but she could still give love, care, and wisdom. And in that, she found a new life. One quiet evening, as they sat around the table, Brittany suddenly broke into tears. They streamed down her cheeks, not tears of pain, but of happiness tangled with a bittersweet ache for the past. "I never thought I'd have something like this," she whispered. Her voice trembled, and her hands nervously fidgeted with the edge of the tablecloth. "I was completely alone. My mom died when I was 10. My dad, he drank, hit me, and then just disappeared. I bounced around, slept wherever I could, ate whatever I found. And when Holly was born, I thought I couldn't do it. I thought maybe it was better to give her away than let her live the way I did." She fell silent, sobbing softly. Megan reached across the table and gently took her hand. "You saved me," Brittany went on, her eyes brimming with gratitude as she looked at Megan. "You gave me a family." Gordon listened, a knot in his throat growing tighter with every word. He wanted to say something, but all he could do was nod and look away. In that moment, he understood, bringing Brittany and Holly into their home wasn't just a whim. It was their chance. A chance to redeem what had been taken 15 years ago, when his mistake had stolen Megan's health, youth, and dreams. Megan would never walk again. That was a truth Gordon lived with every single day. But Brittany and Holly, their laughter, their presence in this house, had become her new light. And his too. Looking at Megan, eyes glowing like they did back when they were young and full of hope, Gordon realized they hadn't just changed the fate of a lost girl. They had brought each other back to life. And neither he nor Megan ever once regretted opening their home, and their hearts, to Brittany and little Holly that rainy night. Years passed. That tiny bundle Brittany had once cradled in the downpour had grown into spirited, curious Holly, a girl with sparkling eyes and a laugh that could light up a room. The house that had once echoed only with the silence of past sorrows was now filled with the patter of small feet, giggles, and the warmth of an unexpected family. Brittany, once just a shadow in the storm, had found more than shelter in their home, she found hope. Slowly but surely, under Megan's kind gaze, she learned to trust again, began to stand taller, stronger. Gordon, who had once eyed her with caution, became a quiet anchor, gruff, yes, but dependable. To Holly, he became something like a stern but loving father. To Brittany, he became someone who didn't judge, just showed up and helped. As Holly grew, the house transformed into a true home, full of warmth and life. Brittany, once a fragile girl on the edge of collapse, now carried a quiet confidence that shone brighter each day. Together, they created a new rhythm, one made of care, small victories, and shared purpose. In the evenings, while Megan and Brittany busied themselves in the kitchen, Gordon would sit at the table with Holly, helping her sound out letters in her storybooks. His voice, usually sharp, softened when he read to her, and Holly would lean into his shoulder, wide-eyed and silent, soaking up every word. These small, ordinary moments, filled with love, became Gordon's escape from the weight of guilt he'd carried for years. When Holly turned 6, it was time for school. Brittany, watching her little girl get ready, couldn't hold back the tears. She had once believed her daughter, born out of desperation, would never have a future. And now, here she was, heading to school with the gentle care and attention of Megan guiding every step. Every weekend, their little family spent the day together, and those days became sacred. On Saturdays, Gordon would load the car with a basket of homemade cookies that Megan and Brittany had baked the night before, and they'd head to the park. Megan, despite her wheelchair, cherished these outings. She breathed in the fresh air, laughed as Holly ran through the grass picking dandelions or tried to chase Gordon, who pretended he couldn't outrun her. Brittany, still reserved at times, came alive in these moments. She told Holly stories from her childhood, the rare, bright memories of her mother singing lullabies. Her voice trembled with happiness, knowing she could now give her daughter memories like those. When Holly started 3rd grade, Gordon decided it was time to help Brittany stand on her own. He saw how hard she was trying, not just to be a mother, but to become someone who could truly support herself and her child. Using some of his old connections, he got her a job as a receptionist at a small hotel nearby. At first, Brittany was nervous about the responsibility, but she adapted quickly. Her kindness and natural ability to listen made her a favorite among both coworkers and guests. Gordon watched her blossom, pride welling in him like he might feel for a daughter. He even allowed himself a rare smile when she showed him her first paycheck, neatly folded into an envelope. To help them live independently while still staying close, Gordon arranged for Brittany and Holly to move into a small apartment in the house next door. When Brittany stepped inside for the first time, holding Holly's hand, she froze on the threshold and burst into tears. "I never thought we'd have a place of our own," she whispered, hugging Holly so tightly the little girl giggled, not understanding why her mother was crying. Megan, sitting beside them in her wheelchair, watched them with so much love that her eyes sparkled. "This is your home, Brittany," she said softly. "But ours will always be open to you." Those years, filled with effort, care, and love, bound them together with invisible, unbreakable threads. Gordon and Megan, Brittany and Holly, had become a family. Every day felt like a quiet miracle, and every weekend a reminder that even out of the darkest night, light can be born. And even when the shadows of the past returned to remind Gordon of his old mistakes, he'd look at Holly running toward him with another perfect test score, or at Brittany proudly sharing stories about her work, and he'd know, they hadn't just saved 2 lives. They'd given each other new ones. But time, relentless and cruel, spares no one. After 5 more years, Megan's already fragile health began to decline. Her body, worn down from years of struggle, started giving in. The smile that once lit up Gordon's world became rarer with each passing day. In her final months, she barely left her bed. Yet her eyes, despite the pain, still glowed with warmth whenever they rested on Brittany and Holly. They were her family, her purpose, her triumph over a fate that had taken so much from her. On the day she felt the end was near, she asked for Gordon. Brittany and Holly came and sat beside her. Their hands trembled, their eyes full of tears. The room, thick with the scent of medicine, was quiet, but that quiet held a weight too heavy to bear. With what little strength she had left, Megan reached for Gordon's hand. Her fingers were cold, but her grip was firm. "Gordon," she whispered, her voice weak but steady, trembling with emotion, "thank you. For everything. For picking Brittany up that night. For giving me, them." She turned her gaze to Brittany, who sat crying in silence, holding Holly close, and continued. "They became my light, my reason. I'm dying happy, because I know, we created something real. You gave me that, Gordon. Thank you." Gordon couldn't speak, the words caught in his throat, and the tears he had held back for so long finally broke free. He gripped her hand tightly, as if he could keep her in this world just a little longer, but he knew she was already slipping away. Brittany and Holly clung to each other, sobbing, their tears a mix of heartbreak and gratitude. Brittany, once a girl on the edge of survival, now held the hand of her grown daughter. And both of them felt the same truth, losing Megan would leave a space in their hearts no one else could ever fill. When Megan closed her eyes for the last time, the room fell still. Gordon, Brittany, and Holly sat in silence, holding on to one another, afraid that letting go might let the world fall apart. But within that silence, there was also something gentle, a light that hadn't gone out. Their bond, their family, born from a chance encounter on a stormy night, had become their salvation. Megan was gone. But her love, her warmth, lived on in them. In every shared day. In every glance. And Gordon, looking at Brittany and Holly, knew he hadn't just made peace with the past. He had given his wife a life filled with meaning, right up to the end. After Megan's passing, the house felt like it was holding its breath. Gordon, Brittany, and Holly mourned her each in their own way, but always together. Brittany found comfort in holding her daughter close, drawing strength from Holly's growing wisdom. And Holly, now a college student, carried in her heart the quiet lessons of kindness Megan had once taught her. Gordon, whose life had been inseparable from his wife's, feared at first that he would drown in the emptiness without her. But each time he saw Holly proudly sharing her achievements, or heard Brittany's confident voice on the phone, calling just to tell him something new, he felt it, Megan was still with them. One quiet evening, Gordon sat on the porch, looking up at the stars Megan had always loved. Brittany and Holly were visiting, their laughter drifting from the kitchen, mingling with the smell of tea and pie baked from Megan's favorite recipe. Holly was giggling, telling stories about her first internship, while Brittany, now the manager of the hotel, was excitedly sharing her plans to open her own cafe. Gordon listened, and a warm peace settled over him. He knew then that what he and Megan had started that rainy night hadn't ended with her passing. It lived on, in Brittany, in Holly, in the life they continued to build together. Megan might be gone, but her love remained, in Brittany's gentle hands, in the spark in Holly's eyes, in the home that had become a symbol of hope. And as Gordon looked up at the sky, he whispered softly, "We did it, my love. You were right." He smiled, truly smiled, for the first time in a long while, without pain. And he understood that their story wasn't just about forgiveness or redemption. It was about how one unexpected night could change